future, as will be amended in the future.
I'm in favor of it.
All right, fabulous. All right, the ayes have it. So, on to new business. First, we have this recommendation to join Clean Energy New Hampshire. Who will be speaking on that?
Councillor Tabor, I believe.
Oh, okay. I think it would be a good thing for the city to do that. There's a lot happening in the clean energy sector right now. And Clean Energy New Hampshire is our statewide voice. They've got new leadership, and they're really engaging on the policy stuff in Concord. And it's a well-run organization. A lot of Portsmouth people are involved, and I think it will help us as a city, if we join, be a voice in Concord, have an influence policy. So that would be my pitch.
I have a question for you, just about how we would join. Would the city join? Do they have like member cities who get together and kind of discuss policy, and then Clean Energy New Hampshire kind of coordinates that? How does that work?
I should add that John Carty put this on the agenda, so
Okay.
not to put you on the spot, Counselor. I think he had more details. I don't
Yeah.
think he's,
I welcome more
he's
details.
here. Oh, he
There's
said
a
it's
municipal membership, and there's 2 levels. I think there's just a standard and then there's a gold. Something else I wanted to throw in on top of what John said is, I think we're one of the few towns in this area that is not a member. You look at Rye, Dover, Exeter, I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, I think we're the outlier at this point now in the general seacoast area. That we're the only ones probably that haven't joined. So, I'm not sure, why is everybody joining but we're not? It's something to look
I
at.
want their voice heard in Concord.
Yeah, yeah.
I was going to say, when this was brought up a couple years ago, the reason we started to look at it was we want to accelerate and scale the transition to a climate-healthy planet. And so how do we actually put the mechanisms in place? And this is one possible tool. And we see John is coming in, so we can get him a chair up here.
Be late.
I just want to say that it seems like a lot of work has been put in by a lot of people, and so I just think it's really a good thing that we've got it to this stage.
John, just so you know, we're taking up the first agenda item, which is the recommendation to join Clean Energy New Hampshire, which you asked to be put on the
Yes,
agenda.
sir. Sorry to be late for talking to my own recommendation. Is there anyone who is not familiar with Clean Energy New Hampshire? Okay, so I guess everyone is at least heard. So I joined about a year ago, actually, at Josh's
John,
recommendation.
if you could speak into a mic so
Sure.
people,
We'll put you up here.
Jess, do you mind if I lean in?
No, I'll sit here.
Oh, no, there's a chair up here if you want.
He's not moving too well.
Oh,
A week from Monday, I won't be a disabled individual anymore. For now, I'm a little slow. Yeah, so Clean Energy New Hampshire, I joined it at Josh's recommendation about a year and a half ago as a citizen member. It's a New Hampshire organization, 501c3. They're primarily involved in education, legislation, and I guess I'd say just they're active in areas around clean energy, sustainability, and everything related to that. I've met with Sam Evans-Brown, their chief, and the folks who run their EV programs and their local power programs several times. They're co-sponsor of the Local Energy Solutions Council session, which I just went to last Friday in Manchester. It was an all-day event, very, very good event. Long story short, this is an organization that has a number of manufacturers, about 24 towns, I would say, mostly in southeast New Hampshire, so most of our neighbors. are members of Clean Energy New Hampshire. And Sam and the folks are very interested in having Portsmouth as, frankly, the largest city in this area as part of the organization for a couple of reasons. We are a voice. I just came from a meeting with one of our counterparts in Rye, who's on the Rye Energy Commission. And the towns have a lot to bring to the table and a lot of questions, but cities our size have, Nashua, Portsmouth, Concord, we've got challenges that, smaller towns that don't necessarily have. So anyhow, for, I think the grand sum total, I think it's $500 or $600 a year, that would make the city of Portsmouth a gold level or whatever member of Clean Energy New Hampshire. That gets us into their administrative discussions, it gets us into their project discussions, very good regular meetings, updates, and so on, and it gets us a voice in Concord. They have a very good legislative arm. I'm surprised they're a not-for-profit. I've worked with Washington-based consultancies that don't do as much as they do for way more money than they charge. So anyhow, that's the 10,000 foot, 900 mile an hour flyby. Questions on CENH or why I think it's a good idea?
My question has to, so if we do make this recommendation, would someone be tasked with representing the city at these meetings?
Great question. So I think that would be up to us. CENH will take as many of us as are willing to participate. They're a very open, communicative, transparent organization. My recommendation would be so you're asking a great question. The answer should be yes. If we're going to make an investment of any kind, there should be someone from this room that attends representing the city of Portsmouth. There are a couple of people in this room that attend pretty regularly already, but now there's an opportunity to do it representing the city.
I think I would add that if the city joins this, because that's a fee to the city government, then really it's the city manager's call on who would be our representative
Gotcha.
to that
Probably.
organization,
Yep.
usually. It's the same thing with like the New Hampshire Municipal Association. But the city manager might want somebody from this committee. You just don't.
Would that be a part of our recommendation, is maybe who we would ask the city manager to appoint?
Usually from the council perspective, we don't tell the city manager what she should or shouldn't do, or how she should staff any kind of membership organization or anything because she makes really those decisions for, as far as the overall staff who participates in what organizational meetings. So it would either be the city manager or the mayor making those decisions.
So what's the next step? Is that the city council recommending that to the city manager? Or is that, say, Peter, for example, running that up through his leadership chain up to the city manager?
Either.
Okay.
I guess the related question to that I have is, who decides? I assume it's the city council? Kate, is that where the yes, no?
The city council decides financial decisions, so if
Right.
it's not something that we can fit into a budget process that we already have, then the council would have to decide it.
Okay.
You had something else?
Yeah, I guess I talked to John about this, and I think it's a great organization, it's a good idea. The concern, I guess, I have is the messaging. And we're working on this community power process right now, and Councilor Tabor might have a better sense of this than I do, but I'm just concerned that if we tell everybody we're going to join Clean Energy New Hampshire and whatever that entails, is it going to send a mixed message about what joining the coalition is all about and how to get that message out to people? So two separate energy initiatives at the same time could create confusion. Maybe we can work on it, but it's something to think about. I don't know how the...
Councilor Tabor, can I take a crack at that and then get your
Sure.
feedback?
Yeah,
So,
please do.
I believe you know Tom Fow in Rye. He mentioned your name a couple of times, so I just had to do it in a great rhythm before I got here. Tom is on the Energy Committee for the city of Rye. He, like many of us, he's a citizen volunteer for a city commission. I met him at the Local Energy Solutions event last week. And he's involved in an effort we've got coming up soon on the, we have an event at the library in the next week or two, the
Yes, New Hampshire buttons up.
New Hampshire, thank you, that's the phrase I was drawing a blank on. Anyhow, we discussed this a little bit, so Peter, to your question, this again, personally, I don't think it sends a mixed message. So RYE is part of Community Power. As we know, a number of towns in our area have joined CPCNH. Membership in Clean Energy New Hampshire, I don't think, this again is an opinion, but I don't think it particularly sends a message around what we are or are not advocating for. It rather just gets us to the table of a not-for-profit who are, as far as I can tell, ardently about communication and legislation and support. So I don't think that would be a problem, and based on the discussion I just had with Mr. Fowle from RYE, I'd say he'd probably agree with that if he were asked the same question about his counterparts from RYE.
Yeah, I don't think, it's not the mixed message I'm worried about, it's more the two messages at the same time. They support the same concept.
So Clean Energy New Hampshire is a big supporter of community power. I mean,
Right.
just to sort of set the context.
Yep.
As far as I can tell, Clean Energy has been a fairly significant driver in helping
Yes.
the CPCNH
Absolutely.
come into being.
Yeah.
So I consider the opportunity for a city or municipality to join CPC the outcome of the kind of work that organizations like CNH does. Now, Councilor Table, you've been at this longer than I have. Am I
Well, I don't
following
want
that correctly?
to, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, so I think that, in this room, we're pretty familiar with what these different energy initiatives are, but I don't think that that is a representation of the widespread of people. And understanding even what community power is has been half of the battle of community power.
You're suggesting we need to do community outreach?
I'm suggesting that, like what Peter's saying, that people won't be able to distinguish the difference because, well, one, I mean, it's truly a naming convention issue among the field because community power is called different things depending on where you live in the US.
Right.
So I just think that even though it might be the right path, I wouldn't want to lose steam on the initiative that's already going with community power because people think it's already gotten done, or we already did something like that, so why would, and it didn't work, right? So why would you do it again? Like there is a risk in that, and maybe it's a yes, this is something that aligns with the values, but in us eventually maybe joining community power officially and having that, then in that step, we also join Clean Energy New Hampshire, right? I don't feel like it's a now or never situation, and I think, as we said, like there's a lot of people in this room and in Portsmouth in general that are involved in this, and I know that there's a lot of value to the city being behind it, but I do worry about people being confused about what all these different initiatives are, separate from us knowing their impact, on the PR side of things and people understanding them. I think it's a really valid concern to consider.
Counselor Tabor and then Counselor Cook.
Yeah, I think there's a simple distinction that may be helpful. Community power is for the benefit of residents. And joining Clean Energy New Hampshire would be for us as a municipality to get the benefits of membership in that organization as we make policy. I think that the public-facing engagement and education has to be heavy around community power because in the end, we're aiming to be their default energy supplier. So, and as Councilor Cook knows, we've got, thanks to Stephanie Secord, a whole month-by-month public engagement calendar, including mail-out survey to the whole community and things like that. Clean Energy New Hampshire, I see that as a counselor as that's a resource for us, for data, for policy decisions, things like that. That would be my take on it.
I wonder if
So that's helpful, yeah, I mean, I think maybe it's just a understanding of what it would take to join. If it's just a matter of a council decision and we join and there's not a lot of outreach around it at this time, maybe the outreach comes after we,
or the avenue that we choose to go
adopt
through it.
the
If we
aggregation.
go through the council, or if we go through, if it's truly a municipality, then maybe it makes more sense to go through the municipality route than to go through the council route and leave the council route for the community power, which is the resident decision.
That would be my recommendation as well. So that's what I was going to say. Let's make if we make the recommendation to the city manager that we join, then if she feels she needs to bring it to the council, it comes to the council under her agenda items, not with a counselor bringing it forward. When we talk about community power at the council level, Councilor Tabor brings it forward. So people know what that is. But if it's coming as just an agenda item for the city manager because she needs an appropriation, that'll be slightly different. And it is with a different approach. I don't think it'll get the same level of discussion.
So what's the next step?
Sounds like we
I think
should write
deciding between those two options, because I wasn't even aware of the option of strictly going through the city manager, but is that the next step now, is for us to determine which of those two is the best next step for us as a commission?
If the committee makes the recommendation to do it, then it goes to without a counselor doing so, then it just goes to the city manager, the recommendation. And then
Peter,
a
would
good
you
example, yeah.
Would you write something, Peter, for the recommendation, or would?
I mean, it would really be an outcome of the meeting. So if the vote of the committee, I'd share the vote of the committee with the city manager, for
All
sure.
right.
Yeah, that's what the city's.
We take a vote
so
then?
If the committee's vote is that.
motion?
Yeah,
Do you have a
well, first of
motion?
all, is
that a
there any
motion?
further discussion on this?
I'll just make a comment. It might be in the community outreach. I'm thinking because of Portsmouth Climate Solutions and we're working for community outreach. And Peter is working on this committee on the climate action plan. I see there's a great opportunity to link the community power to empower us as individual citizens to help move the community in a cleaner energy direction at a faster pace with more options. And that's where I think our leverage to scale and accelerate is, and to educate at the same time. And so when we get to the part where we talk about our report out, we might talk about how we connect this and synergize the message getting out.
Anything else? Is there a motion to recommend we join Clean Energy New Hampshire through the city manager?
I make a motion that
All
Portsmouth,
right.
the city of Portsmouth, join Clean Energy New Hampshire.
Is there a second? Awesome. Any discussion on the motion?
Do we have a consensus, or is there anyone who
Yeah.
is against joining?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. All right, excellent.
Yeah.
On to the next. This is reviewing some old business from our last meeting that I don't know if we got to, or maybe we're just hearing an update. So first, the Community Engagement Subcommittee update. Who would be in charge of that?
So the report back on community power, is there anything
I'm
new
looking
on
at an old agenda. My bad. Report back on community power. Who would that be? Perfect.
Here we go.
Great. Speaking of community power. Really, the community power effort came, well, I was the Rockingham County Planning Commission representative, and I learned about it and got excited and said, this has great opportunities. And Cliff Lazenby was on this committee and learned about it, and he was excited, so we sort of teamed up. And a lot is happening in community power. Let me just give you the quick update. Stepping back in the bigger picture, though, I saw this quote by Kate Marvel in the New York Times, and she's NASA's climate scientist. And she said, "We live in a terrible world, and we live in a wonderful world. It's a terrible world that's more than a degree Celsius warmer. But it's also a wonderful world in which we have so many ways to generate electricity that are cheaper and more cost-effective and easier to deploy than I would have ever imagined. People are writing credible papers in scientific journals making the case that switching rapidly to renewable energy isn't a net cost. It will be a net financial benefit." She said with a head shake of near disbelief, "If you had told me 5 years ago that would be the case, I would have thought, wow, that's a miracle." So, solar is reduced in price 85%. wind is reduced 55%. There's enough solar energy running right now, 120 gigawatts for 23 million homes. And there's the capacity to manufacture. Now, there's a manufacturing base. So what's happening is the old projections of business as usual that were heavy on coal and oil are getting overturned. And, you know, it might mean a degree difference. It might mean a degree and a half if you stretch it out over 20 years. But our power generation and distribution systems need to really change fast to take advantage of that. And I think that's what's exciting about community power. We're going to, around the state, through the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, allow you as residents in your town, in Portsmouth, or residents in Rye, or Durham, or Newmarket, or Keene, to say, we want to choose more renewables in our supply, on our bill each month. And through the aggregated buying, which is now 20% of the homes in the state and could go as high as 50% with all the towns and cities that are interested, including Manchester, we would be able to buy green power more cheaply, and the infrastructure is being built to manage that purchasing, and we would create a market for renewables. And we would force the regulators to allow larger solar arrays, and you know, spur on offshore wind. So that to me is exciting because it really leverages your demand. You want greener power. Most people in Portsmouth want greener power. At our June 29th event, we did a little spot survey of 85 people. 75% of them want more green power, between 50 and 100%, and a huge number want 100%. So the utilities are behind, and we'll drag them into this new future by using a demand-based model. And what's happening right now is the coalition is hiring their energy buyer, a firm named Ascend Analytics, that will buy a mix of short and long-term contracts. And they've also hired a company called Pine Solar, I believe. Let me check. Anyway, a company that will handle all of the billing and customer service, and they're hiring a CEO. They hope to have in place by early next year. And the first flight of towns, about 9 towns, are hoping to be switched over to community power in May. We're looking at the second wave in September. And it's actually not a bad thing to wait for the second wave, something as complex as this. So the coalition has $750,000 in seed money. Some of us were involved early in trying to raise philanthropic money through the greater, through the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, and that got the first seed capital, and now there's substantial startup money. And so it's all starting to happen. I think the coalition will be built out with the capabilities it needs by early next year. And Kevin Charette of our Energy Committee is our board member. He's a former Eversource executive. He's handled all of the customer service aspects of cutting over community aggregations, town by town, through Massachusetts and Connecticut. He really knows his stuff on this. And as a result, CPCNH hauls him onto all their committees. So he's doing great work for us. And what you'll see coming up is we're going to do a survey out to everybody in the community, asking, do you want 100% renewable power? Do you want 50% renewable power? Would you like more renewable power at the same price you're paying now for your Eversource default? And that'll give us a sense for the menu of options that we want to create. And we'll also find out how many people are currently using Eversource default. It usually runs about 80%. And we would replace them as the default, hopefully with a base program that has more renewable, and then the options tiered up to 50 and 100% or whatever, wherever we find the demand. The letters for that would go out in August, July, August, and then it would start to happen. So that's the timeline, and it's going to be, as I say, a big change to harness everybody's desire and demand for renewables, to make markets, to fairly quickly move us to a higher percentage of renewable energy in our consumption in Portsmouth and all these other towns, and to change the landscape to one where we, the people, are saying, we want to get more renewables. How do we create that generating capacity? And then all of the regulatory changes in Concord that will have to flow from that. And as you know, in Concord, the utilities have a big voice. So what's exciting to me is all the other cities and towns, and all of you as residents, will also have a big voice. We would be the biggest default energy supplier in the state if every town that wants to sign up signs up. So that's the deal.
Technical question. You mentioned timeline, September, which I think is fantastic. But actually, I thought it would be longer than that. So September, I think is, September's wonderful. Let me just think September, because that makes me happy. I have an alternative power source. I think like many have signed up for, another third party, whatever. I have a 2-year contract with them. If we switch over to community power, does it null and void that contract, or is that something, and you may not know the answer to this, or do I need to reach out to them? Because I know I think there's a clause in there that says I can cancel anytime. Just curious.
Yeah, you'd have to find out from your current 2-year contract supplier.
Okay. So
if you can switch.
That's an implementation detail that, from a community outreach perspective, we'll probably need to help the community understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Well, it's great. Yeah.
That was very exciting. So, Councilor Tabor, I love the September date also.
Yeah.
So does that mean that the decision for the city to join the coalition has been made, and that's the time frame, or is it still to be formally made?
Yes. We joined the coalition in February.
Okay, that's what I thought.
The council voted to create an aggregation plan, and we're in the process of telling the PUC we're developing an aggregation plan. And that aggregation plan is in draft form right
Okay,
now.
great. And then that September timeframe, is that Portsmouth's choice that we'd like to be in wave 2 rather than wave 1? Or is that the coalition that decides that?
We looked at, that was just the logistics of
Okay.
getting everything done. We if we'd met twice a week for 6 weeks, we might have been able to join the first wave.
Oh, I'm not advocating for first wave, I'm just curious. I also like being Rev 2.0 personally.
Yeah.
Beta testing.
Now, we don't know the exact dates, but they will probably time with the periods that Eversource does their buying, which
Okay.
is May
Right.
and September.
Excellent. It's very exciting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thanks for all the work you're doing on this. It's really great. We had a question come up at the last meeting about zoning and solar arrays or solar farms. And we even talked about this committee making a motion to ask the council to follow up with it. And then we decided we should consult your committee about that before going forward with this. And if people remember differently, please jump in. This is my memory of what happened at that meeting, and Josh has a good idea, and I know Counselor Cook, you know well too. But is that something that the Energy Committee is talking about? It just seems the possibility of having solar farms is too tempting
Yeah.
to not do the zoning.
We are talking about it. I think the coalition is the natural buyer. And Peter, maybe you can help me on this. I still think, isn't there a limit on the size of solar arrays? You
Yeah, I
can do
think it's
5
400.
megawatts?
400? No, is that right? Yeah,
The
there's
latest-
a limit. It
Yeah.
went up from 100 to 400, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know all the details, obviously.
So,
But it's still not solar farm material yet.
right,
you know.
it's still pretty small. And the utilities,
That's a state limit, I'm sorry. I didn't-
yes,
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
because
PUC.
they don't like having 10, 15, 20% of their supply being produced, outside of their control, so to speak. I think
They
that's
being who in this case, Counselor?
the utilities.
Oh, yeah.
So
I can imagine
the-
they don't.
So that,
It's just so clear which they were talking about.
well, they're just wires and bills.
Yeah.
But, they've managed to convince legislators in Concord that you need a limit on net metered energy for stability.
Sure.
That's, again, this is where things are changing much faster than the regulation. And so to your question, Effie, and this is a good reason to join Clean Energy New Hampshire, they will work on busting that 5 megawatt or 400 kW limit on solar arrays so that towns and cities could build bigger ones, private enterprise could build bigger ones and sell it. And, in terms of zoning, I think that's work that council and the planning board need to do. If we can, because, if you fast forward 5 to 10 years, why wouldn't our city want to be generating its own power? Even if we sell it back to CPNH and it comes back through
Right.
that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I recalled something, so I just checked that Manchester has the largest municipal solar array in the state that will supply 3.8 million kilowatt hours of clean energy.
So the difference
So
might be that you
am I
can have a
comparing
solar
apples and
field.
oranges?
It's sending it back to the grid, so it's a net metering limit. So a way for a company to come in and build a solar farm, they have to have a way to sell it or utilize it. I
So
think that's
this
the
is a
limits.
municipal solar.
Right, they're using
grid,
it for
so that's one
municipal
issue,
purposes. That's a little
Apart from
different. Yeah.
zoning, right?
Right,
And then there's the issue of commercial
right.
solar arrays that we wanted to help move along.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Effie, if I remember, was it just a matter of updating the use tables in the zoning regulations, like we did for the electric vehicle charging? Doing a similar thing with solar?
If I could jump in, that's what we had discussed, 'cause the use tables and the zoning ordinances currently doesn't have anything listed for solar or for EVs. And the thought process was, since the enabling legislation allows us to essentially zone almost anything under several different causes, one of them being renewable energy, we could do that. where step one could be the EVs, that's still at the planning board level. Step two in the future could be something similar for solar, but from the sounds of it, municipal, we could go big if there was space for that, but even if there were a plot of land big enough, and if it was allowed in the zoning, it would not be allowed for a commercial solar farm that would generate more than a certain limit at this point.
By state or by our limitation, the city?
If we change the zoning to allow it, it
Right,
would be by
okay.
state.
And just a thought, because this is something I've been noodling on a little bit, and one of the reasons I caught up with our counterpart in Rye tonight. So the solar farm concept is very much running into the limits that are currently in place, and we hope to see those legislated upwards. That will, once we get the size underway, that will still have to be fed back into the grid, of course. That's why, one of the reasons why Eversource wants to limit it. But we also want to just keep in mind the site arrays. So as we think about a building like the one we're sitting in, or the high school, or whatever, I've seen it a couple of places, I'll have to dig out the references, but some recommendations that municipalities think about. You've got an inventory of buildings, and if a building is utilizing either its roof space or its ground space for its own usage, then one can consider it as, well, we're taking care of the kilowatt hour usage of that facility before we even have to talk about feeding back into the grid.
Right.
So just another way to look at it.
And that doesn't
Behind
need a
the-
zoning,
behind
that
the
doesn't need a
meter.
zoning change.
Exactly.
That's just the
Right.
power they use. So that's just an
Exactly.
accessory use that's allowed, basically.
And I heard something really interesting tonight that I'm going to have to check out, but if you don't mind, I have to share it because I actually get excited over this. Now, this is the town of Rye. Like the town of Portsmouth, the city of Portsmouth, they have a fairly significant historical zoning. According to this gentleman, when the movements were being made in Rye to place arrays on the several school buildings in town, the historical commission raised an objection, and it turned out that they have no jurisdiction. And upon further exploration, this again, take this with a grain of salt until I've had a chance to check it out, because I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on TV. But in Rye, this gentleman's belief is that historic has no jurisdiction on any municipal buildings relative to, at least relative to the deployment of solar panels. So, not to pick on historical at all, but it's just something to be aware of. As we think about how to electrify the city, and I know I keep coming back to the city's footprint, but I'm thinking about what can we influence? It may turn out that we have more influence over the fleet of buildings and a building-by-building electrification than even I thought we did.
We'll go Effie first.
Yeah,
then-
and Counselor Cook mentioned last time our municipal parking lots. You know, we see it a lot when we travel in Vermont and Massachusetts, that's big area for solar panels.
We have space, yeah.
And I think Ben has brought up a couple times, right, putting solar panels over at the high school
Nothing would make me happier.
above the parking.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It could be done.
Yeah.
So my understanding has always been that the city does not have to abide by zoning or any of the ordinances.
Does or does not?
Does not. So historical,
You gotta
we
love that.
don't need to abide by, for example, when it comes to the McIntyre building, it's by choice that we're gonna go through all of those boards.
Right.
So generally, the city wants to go through the same process that any other owner would go through, but I don't think it's required.
Good, that's good to know, that was news to me.
Tori?
Just out of curiosity, so, you know, it's making it, but distribution is also often a huge issue, and the borderline archaic methods in which we distribute power. And if the power is being generated for something like community power, whether it's municipal or commercial, and it's going directly into community power, who takes responsibility for like the necessary distribution upgrades? And, you know, traditionally that has been the utility companies, you know, but does that change if how do you get it from point A to point B, and do those upgrades that are necessary for the amount of power that we're talking in a lot of these ways? I know this is a huge issue out west right now, is there's huge solar farms, and they can make all the power in the world, they can't get it to the places it needs to go, or they can't store it when they get there.
Right.
So just kind of, how does that fit into the whole picture?
I mean, let's see if you're getting, I'm way out on thin ice here, but in terms of what I know, but the electrons are bought and sold on contracts, but all that energy goes right into the grid, and New England's grid is ISO New England. So there's two parts to your question. How does the distribution work now? ISO is able to bring on stream supply and put it into the grid, and then there's a financial system for selling those electrons. It's not like water where you have a quantity. It's, 60 cycles a second. It's all in balance that many times a second. But for the future, your question is a good one. Is the grid going to be able to handle the demand as we electrify? And I don't have the answer to that, except to say that the investor-owned utilities have every incentive in the world to invest big capital in their wires and systems, because they make more money selling more energy, and they can pass those capital costs on to rate holders, rate payers. Sorry, but I don't know the answer. We're in this new age where we're seeing heat pumps and electric vehicles and electric buses and a rapid electrification and tumbling cost of supply, and will the grid keep up with all of that? That's a question the whole country faces.
So you, and then we'll go to Effie.
So I was talking with Ben D'Antonio, who's on the committee.
Brilliant guy.
Super awesome. Great guy. And he brought up, I'll just bring it up and I defer to your reaction since you guys are on the committee with him. He was mentioning how great Rebecca was as she straddled both committees. She has since left both committees. He was saying that, he really appreciated having this kind of like ally on the sustainability committee. So he asked me to kind of float, and I actually didn't know you'd be here today, so it's kind of fortuitous, but do we think that someone from the sustainability committee would be a good resource for that? If so, who would like to volunteer or potentially be a part of that? So we'll leave it to you guys for comment first.
Well, that would be the committee's decision, but myself, I think it'd be good. I do miss having Becca as a voice from both, and that, when we were setting goals, she was a clear voice for this group. So I'll, when we have our November meeting, I'll put that question to them, and if we come back and say we'd like a member, got somebody willing to do it, would you be?
Great, thanks.
Okay.
I had the same question as John, so it's taken care of. Thanks.
Anything else on community power? Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Councilor
Yeah,
Tabor.
I think I may slip away and have dinner, which I haven't done.
No, yeah, little project. All right, next, we'll hear an update from the Community Engagement Subcommittee. Who would that be?
Yeah, that'll be me.
Awesome.
And I'm joined by Effie and Jess. So it's the three of us that make up the subcommittee. The subcommittee, we started about 2 months ago, 3 months ago, I think it was, when we all decided to create thanks, John, create the Community Engagement Subcommittee. So Jess, Effie, and I have met a few times, and tonight I'm going to give a overview of some of what we have worked on and kind of where we're headed. So for starters, we when we first met, we said, what is the scope of what we're doing? I mean, what is community engagement subcommittee? What does that mean? So a couple things that we've come up with is set educational objectives and key results. And so as we go forward, that's going to be really important for driving community action, climate action, and then also climate action that supports the CAP is the education. And we did have a good meeting right before this meeting, specifically talking about that. And those educational sessions have to be, from an engagement perspective, it's got to be a what is it for me? And so we really want to piggyback on some initiatives and funds through like NH Saves and the new IRA legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, and tax credits and things like that. So I think that we're going to keep pulling on those threads, but there's a lot of opportunity, just like the session next Wednesday, button up. Next Thursday, I'm excited. I'm going to join because I want to see how can I save money, right? At the same time, I'm helping the environment, but it's that getting that engagement is kind of like, what is in it for me? And with inflation the way it is nowadays, how can I reduce my monthly bills, honestly? So education is something that we'll be looking at, setting objectives and key results, and looking at doing this maybe on a quarterly basis, and bringing that back to the bigger committee here to say, over the next quarter or over the next 6 months, these are the engagement, these are the recommendations that we have for community engagement activities and goals. Also, the subcommittee provides a mechanism for inputting and setting priorities. Like I just said, right? It's, what are the priorities? What are the goals from an engagement perspective for the next 3 months, 6 months, whatever it may be? And also to measure those. So how do we know we were successful? We had 3 educational sessions. What's our target, right? How many people did we want to get there involved, and et cetera? It has to be measurable. Also increasing the understanding of the impact in climate action, and as it dovetails into the education, but also looking at that from a greater perspective too, on what does the citizens of Portsmouth, what does the community think are important for climate and climate action? And Yale's got a group that they've done some amazing studies and research. And so there's empirical studies there's empirical data from nationwide. So we can start looking at gauging what is important to Portsmouth citizens in comparison to the rest of the U.S., I think, and how do we influence that over time and measuring that? And so, those are some of the kind of the boundaries that we've looked at. This is our sandbox, right, from a subcommittee. What are we focused on? Some of the priorities that we've been working on right now is engagement tools. So engagement tools is we've narrowed it down to Mass Energize and to Bright Action, are the two that, and Effie led this effort also through the Portsmouth Climate Solutions and through C-Ray. So there's been a phenomenal amount of work that's been done on these community climate tools. And we had a meeting last night with a Portsmouth Climate Solutions group, and the recommendation was made to move forward with Bright Action as the platform. And next, it's going to go to C-Ray. The board is we're looking for the C-Ray board to give it the thumbs up. We're working on funding. So funding is going to come from the committee. The funding is not going to come from the city of Portsmouth. roles and responsibilities of managing that platform, really, that falls on C-Ray and the subcommittee, the Portsmouth Climate Solutions Subcommittee. That doesn't mean that that organization doesn't work hand in hand with the city of Portsmouth, right? But this is the community that is driving community action. Timeline, we're looking at about 3 months. If we can get funding in place, we get a C-Ray board, gives us the thumbs up, and we start moving forward and engaging with Bright Action, we think we're, probably about 3 months out. There'd have to be a lot of community engagement and communication to actually launch something like this. So we would definitely look for support from the city, definitely in the form of a city newsletter that could, point to this great initiative that the community of Portsmouth and the city are partnering with. Also make it really clear that the climate action tool supports the CAP. So we just want to be really clear, also messaging that with the community, that those climate actions are directly supporting the CAP. And as we develop the CAP, we can tailor the actions that are listed in the tool that we're looking for people to take. And at the same time, we are looking to put together a plan around education. And so education is so important because it's, as I mentioned before, what's in it for me, right? I mean, why should I install a heat pump? Why do I even care? Or why should I install new insulation?
Excellent. Good. Thank you.
In my house. But when people look at some of the rebates, some of the tax credits, and how that can reduce some of their bills, and guess what? It helps the environment too, right? And so that's the way we're gonna, I think, pull people in. But there's a lot of work for us to do around community engagement, but education is gonna be a key part. And that button-up workshop is fantastic. I'm really excited to join that next week, to learn, right? And kind of the look and the feel of that workshop and what worked and what didn't work, and how can we piggyback on that and reproduce something like that and make that even stronger, and potentially put together a calendar that maybe we say, over the next 3 months or 6 months, these are the calendar of events. Maybe we hold it at the library. It's hybrid. Maybe it's online. It's at the library. Do some combination of things. So Effie, Jess, and I, there's all these threads that we're pulling on. And when we do get together, the three of us, it's just kind of a buzz of energy with ideas. So we will come back to the committee here with a more formal plan around all of that. But having the climate action tool is really exciting to move us forward with that. And so, Jess, do you want to say a couple, or would you say a couple words about some of the conversations you've had and where you're going with the library in reference to them partnering with us around education?
Sure. So like Herb said, we realize one of the big pieces that we need to, or one of the big goals we need to accomplish is education. And after I did my plastic story event at the library, I met Christy Bryan. She is the new supervisor of programming and outreach over there, and she told me that night that sustainability is really a priority for her in the events moving forward for the library. So she and I actually meet a week from today. She was very interested in talking to me, especially once she found out that I was part of the sustainability committee and I was involved in this subcommittee working on community engagement. So our hope, at least my impression from the subcommittee, is that the library can really be a strong partner for us to either host events or share about events or just help this whole process. I know we have other people at the library as well who are very interested in this topic and making the library more active and part of the community outreach and education. So
Excellent. couple other things to note. From a website perspective, being part of, Jess Effie and I are part of the C-Ray and the Portsmouth Climate Solutions subgroup. And so we'll be working with C-Ray to add content to their website that points back to the city. Ultimately, when we get climate action plan, that points to that, that also directs people to this new action tool that we'll be deploying. And so we'll be working with C-Ray on content for the updates to the website. The city of Portsmouth, the Blue Ribbon Committee, is there an opportunity to look at the content that is there and maybe refresh that? And is that something that Jess Effie and I could help with?
Certainly, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And do we coordinate that with you, Peter?
Yeah, me and Kate.
Okay,
Yep.
you and Kate, awesome. And then also, in the future, we would want to look at putting a link pointing out to C-Ray and pointing out to the tool that, this is part of the city-community partnership.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah, and I
yeah.
think that, we'll talk more about that as we move forward with the climate
Yeah.
action plan, but it's great to see all the energy you guys have, and if you can build that energy in the community, then figuring out how to dovetail it shouldn't be
Yeah.
a problem, it should be a benefit, just having a consultant come in with all this community energy, I think is great, to see that sort of, they're gonna be looking a lot at equity as well, so bringing in other ideas and other ways to do outreach that we haven't really looked at before. So they'll be diversifying the outreach, I think, quite a bit, at least that's our ask for them.
Yeah.
So I think, I think it's gonna be interesting to see how it all fits together, but I think these consultants have gotten other plans going before. Let's hope that the ones we get can do a good job, with our help too. But I
Yeah.
think it's gonna be important that we can show them that you're not starting from zero here. This is great. You got people that are doing things, and I think they're gonna be excited to have that. It's rare that you go into a project as a consultant, I think, and have somebody sort of already started on the job that you're supposed to do. So, but we're gonna encourage them to show them that that's an important thing and a benefit, and we're building on this. We're not gonna start over or push them back. We're gonna
Yeah.
work together and bring them forward. And we've been talking with city staff. We've had a meeting with city staff. We're gonna have a follow-up meeting with city staff to get the departments on board and make the city more of a leader in our efforts as an eco-municipality and using the natural step. And that's part of the message we're gonna use with the climate action plan, to go to the community and talk about that. So there's a lot of good tie-ins. We haven't really worked with the library yet, but that'll be part of the process as well.
Okay, excellent. That sounds great.
Great.
Okay, and then PNH, I want to say PNH 400. Effie, do you want
Yeah.
to talk about that?
Yeah, great, thanks, Herb. They want us to say Portsmouth NH 400.
Oh, Portsmouth.
Even though on their website it does say PNH, we're going to go with the full Portsmouth NH 400. I just wanted to catch people up. Portsmouth Climate Solutions and our community engagement group has been working with Portsmouth NH 400, and they would love to get some oral histories or essays of 400 words or less. I think they're going to be doing oral histories with our Bert Cohen and Ann Bliss, but I think of other people on this committee who have been involved in environmental issues or climate action. I specifically thought of Josh Denton. And, they don't only want the history, but the forward-looking, the future. And Josh, I think you'd be a natural for both the oral history or a 400-word essay. I don't know the deadlines, but if you check their website, you'll find out. The second thing I wanted to mention, unless there's questions about that part? No? The second thing I wanted to mention about Portsmouth NH 400 is that Portsmouth Climate Solution agreed on 3 dates because their calendar deadlines were coming up and they needed the information from us. So we have April 21st, which is a Friday, for Earth Day kickoff. And we want to have lots of speakers, lots of young people, talking about youth being our future. That kind of thing interests Portsmouth NH 400 a lot. Of course, it interests us too,
Effie,
because
can I just interrupt for a sec? Are you talking about Portsmouth NH 400 dates, these 3 dates?
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So they're printing a calendar, and they want to have it out before the holidays, but it will be the 2023 calendar. So we'll have April 21st, a Friday, for Earth Day kickoff, April 22nd, Earth Day, Day of Action. Now, this is not defined, but one thing we talked about was having non-gas floats for the parade. The parade isn't until June, so if we start working April 22nd on the floats, get people going pedaling rickshaws and get Portsmouth High School Eco Club, I don't know what these things are going to run on. I know that Rebecca's husband has a Jeep, and he replaced it with an electric, a battery.
Wow.
Yeah, some people own electric vehicles that could help with the floats.
I think I saw Bert volunteer to drive one of the rickshaws.
So, I mean, Earth Day, Day of Action could be a lot of different things. Could be things doing beach cleanups, working with, we do want to see, different age groups and diverse groups of people working on things. And then we reached for a date in the fall. And about 6 months after Earth Day, we kind of invented Sustainability Day. So that will be Sunday, October 22nd. And what we're really, really hoping, crossed fingers, legs, everything except my eyes, is that the Climate Action Plan might be forthcoming by then. And it could be like the big reveal, announce, whatever, that day. So if it's not ready, we'll have to have like something else, like
No
some
pressure.
other, some milestone related to the Climate Action Plan. But so far as I know, those dates are going in the calendar, so I wanted you all to have them. And if you have any questions about it, Portsmouth Climate Solutions has more information.
Effie, I read the application, and I know you mentioned SS4S in there too, and I know we'd love to get involved. but
I'm
I also-
sorry, mentioned what?
SS4S. SECO Students for Sustainability.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I know
right.
they'd love to get involved, but I also think maybe the Community Day of Action app on Earth Day, I think that'd be a great place to get the library involved too, if we want to get people
Yeah.
of all age groups there as well.
Right, yeah. And the Sustainability Day, we could model that like the Sustainability Fair that Sea Ray did in previous years, but I didn't make it that specific. I mean, we left it open at this point because we have some months to plan it, but we had to tie down the dates. Right.
Do you know if the kickoff is going to be after school closes or during the day?
I think it would make sense to do it after school, but
Yeah.
we don't have times yet, so.
Great.
Because if we could organize like a bus or something to take kids downtown,
Right.
get them involved, it could be something really special.
Yeah, we could have a school-organized climate strike, because
Yeah.
it's a Friday.
Yeah. I'm all in.
That's counter.
Climate action part.
I don't know how that works.
Herb, anything else on community engagement, Effie, Jess?
No, unless anybody has any questions for us and kind of what we're doing as a subcommittee and starting to get some good traction, I think. Yes.
Just a comment. So I think, the day of action, that tends to generally be like community-wide, right? Everyone coming together, which I think is really great. But I think what you were speaking to with the CAP, and at the end of the day, like, people really need to understand how this applies to their life and the actions they can take. And whether the CAP is out or not, maybe that sustainability day is kind of the same concept, but what are you doing at home, right? That'll also give the platform time to hopefully get into more people's hands and be using it. And so maybe for that sustainability day, the focus is like disseminating that information. There's been a lot of education, there's a lot of time for education for people to get that information. And then it's also October, it's going into winter. So as far as like energy efficiency and a lot of those things, there's a lot of actionable things that people can like kind of do. And so maybe that's, there should be community aspects to it as well. But I think it's also like hey, like, this is the day where if you, and maybe even with like, public works, so you could do like this is when you have empty paint cans, when you put them out, like all those things that happen at home that are decisions that we make, and kind of like make it community, but I guess at home. I don't know how you combine that. We'll have to get a PR person on that one. But.
Word spin on that.
Yeah.
I would just also want to add, we've talked a lot about events, but we are also talking about other ways to engage with the community once we get some of these initial pieces kind of solidified. So we've thought about, a survey to try to find out what people's priorities are. And I've reached out to the Portsmouth Housing Authority to see if they have good ways so that we can connect with people, because I know, for a lot of people, if they're working 2 jobs or they do the night shift, like, you might be able to catch them as they're picking up their kids or dropping them off. So, like, trying to be creative about how we are really working to engage the whole community and not just the people who pay attention to the events going on at the library and that kind of stuff. So that is on our radar, just so you all know that we are thinking about those pieces as well.
I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, so I think one thing that we've talked about kind of here and there is trying to figure out the best way to engage with the community on like an ongoing basis, so not just around the events. And so one thing I know I've brought up is like, how do we kind of, intertwine some of these little nuggets into like the water bills or the city newsletter, that sort of stuff. And I brought up a couple times, I think Brian got sick of it, but Brian did put in the last couple of city newsletters, he did say that little snippet around, energy efficient appliances and that sort of stuff. So, as you mentioned, New Hampshire Saves, is there a chance to kind of talk to the people who create the content for the newsletter and or any of the other social media to kind of like start dropping those just into kind of everyday use? So it's not just like, hey, here's an event, you should do this. It's like, it's just kind of, you normalize, sustainability in how it can help you. Hey, upcoming winter bills are happening, how do you do this? So I do think there is like a little forum for that.
And Jess Effie and I, before this meeting, that's one of the things we talked about, was spoon feeding the community the information they need. Because NH Saves doesn't run throughout the year, right? They get funded, and then ultimately the funds disappear. And does the community know, when those funds are going to happen? And to educate people, say, if you're thinking about windows or something else where you could get a rebate back from NH Saves, maybe now's the time, right? Maybe they're going to fund in April, but now's the time to find a contractor, to talk to contractors, right? Because, to prepare for it. And so it's that type of information, I think, that's hugely valuable. But don't just point somebody to a website and say, hey, go to NH Saves, and you go figure it out yourself. I think part of the community engagement is us to distill down what is really important to help people maximize,
To spoon feed it to them in a different, messaging mediums.
Yeah. And that's something we have to look at. The city newsletter, I think, is great, right? But what other venues? There's education at the library is great, but what other venues?
Water bill, we're in control of.
Counselor
Yeah.
Cook, yeah.
We also have, this was kind of a segue into the green building, because it's part of a conversation I had with our chief building inspector, Shanti Wolf. He's very excited about green initiatives and has been doing workshops for contractors. So, maybe it's in workshops for contractors. It's mentioned that, you can all be sure to remind your clients that if we do this in January or February, they have a good chance of getting New Hampshire Saves money, right? Or, that kind of, if you do this level of energy efficiency, maybe then you will,
The Home Builders Association is one of the biggest supporters of New Hampshire Saves, which is a fun dynamic. It's good. I mean, it's good to have an organization like that behind it. And I think inspections and permits are a great way to most builders' hearts.
They can use a newer building code.
Yeah, and that's my next.
The building
when we
code?
get there. Yeah, the building code, that's what I was
There you
good
go.
at. That's what my conversation was, so.
Let's lead right into it.
Yeah, well, if we're done, I'll wait for.
Anything
Laura.
else on community engagement, guys? All
No, I
right.
just think it's great you guys are doing all this work. and getting so far along. And I think we are, it's funny because the message, we haven't been doing as much probably because we're waiting for the climate action plan to just get going. But the message that I've been getting out, and we had a talk about the coastal conservation plan recently and how we can work climate action planning into work with the coastal conservation plan, and the state people that are getting that plan out are interested in hearing that. So they're, trying to fit it in with other events is really important because people come out for different reasons. They don't all read the newsletter, they don't all go to the library, but if you spread it out everywhere, then you're gonna reach more people, so that's great.
Absolutely.
Just a quick alibi on the Portsmouth 400 word. Submissions are November 1st. That's the deadline.
Wow.
So, anyone interested?
Get ready.
Quick.
Yeah, move it.
It was September, so they moved it to November. And tomorrow I'll be meeting with the guy, Ann Bliss and I, for the other part.
Who are you meeting with?
Marlon
Pinto? Is that who it is?
No.
I know
Melville.
Chuck's doing the 400 word. Chuck, former reporter.
Yeah, the reporter, but he's going to try to get somebody to interview us. I'll get his name in a minute.
All right.
Trevor. Charlotte, maybe?
Mel. His name is Mel.
Gotcha. All right. We can move on to the Green Building Subcommittee update. Is that Tori?
So we have draft number 2, draft number 3 of our municipal policy. So within the city, buildings and infrastructure recommendations, we had a chance, last time I mentioned this too, to sit down with DPW. We're now in the process of creating our second draft to put in front of them again. We think it's really important for them to be on board and to be aware and to give them, we're also exploring how we can help with that process. Specifications in construction are a big thing and they're a pain in the butt and no one wants to look at them. Also, side note, is most of my job, so like that is a great avenue to help them with. As well as a little bit of kind of on the PR side, in them doing these, making these steps and changing in some cases, not huge changes, but some small changes in how they do things. Like, I think the community would be interested to know that and those impacts along the way, and it would only help with DPW with their engagement. And so we're in the process of doing that. I've put this draft it's currently in the process of getting reviewed by a lot of different people, get as many perspectives as possible, because I think that's really important. One thing that had me thinking from our earlier discussion was initially, the concept was this was a city council-based policy that we would ask to be adopted. It is a municipal-based policy. It is not a community-based policy. So is there a discussion about doing it in an avenue, like through the city manager instead? And waiting for the city council route for other community-based initiatives that we're already talking about with energy disclosures and helping people with home improvements and all of those, that side of green building. Is this something that maybe goes through the avenues of the municipality because it is really
Yeah, it
only
is management.
impacting?
It's really management rather
Yeah,
than
it's more management.
policy. Yep.
So, and I think, all the meat and potatoes of what would be written would still all apply. It would just kind of be a different form, but I think it's something that we should really consider because I think it's probably a more, sensible way of going about the chain. And also I think it will help with some confusion because one response that I've gotten from a lot of people when they read this, no matter how many times it says municipal on the page, people are like, oh, well, like, developers aren't going to do this. You're like, well, no, this is just the city. But it doesn't matter how many times you write it on the page, people see these policies and how does it impact me, right? That's the first. And so I worry a little bit of this going to city council. Maybe everyone on city council and in that room understands that this is just for municipal buildings and city buildings, but then when down the line we try to do something that is more community-based or more widespread, people are like, wait, didn't we already do this? So I think maybe
That's a good point.
the management route. might be the way. And honestly, from a lot of the things that are in this policy, some is new and would be updated and pushing the city a little bit on practice, building practice. But some of it is stuff that we're already doing, right? So it's more so just this is our stance in the long term on this, that I think is important to have.
Yeah, and that fits really well with the climate action plan and the greenhouse gas inventory for the municipal side, kind of divides it up that way.
Counselor Cook and then Counselor Denton.
Well, if Counselor Denton has a comment on this exact thing, then.
Yeah, thank you. So the city council has passed policies that were solely for city property. The first one that comes to mind was the single-use disposable policy that was solely for all city property, such as buildings, the schools, parking lots. So it wouldn't be out of the ordinary for the council to bring something like that forward, although it just addresses city property.
And we have something before the council right now. Actually, the city manager raised it at the meeting Monday. An update to our building codes coming from Shanti Wolf, who is our chief building inspector. And I had a conversation with Shanti about green building codes. And he's actually really excited about this. So
Love to have a conversation.
he's talked about putting a section in the code, possibly coming before the council that would be at the next council meeting, frankly. That's just basically a placeholder, green building codes. And then working with the subcommittee here, or the committee through the city manager, that has to be always coordinated through the city manager, to design kind of that section, which would include things like incentives, and also requirements. So we already have some incentives, so those would be built in, but, then the question becomes, what additional incentives are possible? What requirements are possible? We've had discussions around, can we require things like solar stub outs, right, for a certain level of construction? So if you have a certain level of remodeling in a home or an existing building, can you require solar stub out, car charger to be installed? So those are conversations that I think he would be really happy to have with the subcommittee as he continues to develop the code and update the code.
Yeah,
So,
I would
so
love to facilitate that.
Yeah.
I mean, that position is he's the in-between between the people doing it and, that's the key position. And
Yeah.
quite honestly, traditionally, not usually sharing that motivation. And so I think we're in a great place that he's motivated by that.
Yeah.
Because that's usually the keystone that you have to try to put in place, so.
Right. Yeah, he's done a fantastic job updating our codes in general.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is a good place then for the committee to have that, do that liaison work with the city, because those things do come before the council, and the council votes on them ultimately. So this is a way for this committee to work through the city to do that.
And I think maybe some of the things that we've been working on and developing in the municipal, our intent of that was to be a example, right? These are the types of things that are feasible now, that are happening, that don't come at insane price issues. And if they do, then at some point you do have to take it within reason, and we understand that. And so I think we can kind of push that side through and be having the parallel conversation, then it will only help him too, because it's like, no, proof is in the pudding, we're here, we've accepted this, we're doing it. I think it would be great.
Tori, would it be possible for you to send a draft of what you're working on to the committee? I think
Yeah.
everybody would love to take a look themselves.
Yeah, definitely. I think the question is, do we redraft it into a format that's more towards the city manager before we do that out?
Yeah, probably, makes
Probably.
sense.
So we'll take it out of the kind of the city council policy formats and put it into more of
And probably go over it with Public Works first, too, to see that they're on board before we send it out
Yeah.
too widely, because we don't want to send out something that's aspirational that is a little too much or doesn't fit, so.
So, yeah, definitely. I think by the next meeting, I'm pretty
Yeah, it's pretty
comfortable
far
with
along. Yep.
everyone will have a draft in their hand, have a reasonable time to review it, so maybe next meeting we can really have a conversation about all the things that are in it and how we got to those and any other things.
And before the next meeting, I will talk to the city manager about connecting the subcommittee with Shanti Wolf.
That'd be awesome.
Right.
Yep.
I think I just want to throw out there for everyone who might not be aware, but Tori, thanks to all of her efforts, has made one of the finalists for the 10 to watch list. So thank you, Tori.
Watch it.
Which I found out 5 minutes ago on my phone. Thank you.
All right, any further comments on the subcommittee update? Awesome. Other business, looks like Bert, you put transportation, do we have an update from there?
I do. 3 points. One, I don't think I missed a meeting in years, and I'm going to miss the next meeting. And so Bill Lyons asked me to make an announcement now about next meeting, and Peter, you got it, so you can back me up on whatever I leave out. Bill has a very active subcommittee on transportation, and he's very much wanting to connect it to the Climate Action Plan. On the subcommittee, there are 6 people. He has Sabre, he has really an active committee, and they're taking on many aspects of what are the best practices that might be recommended for transportation in our city. And with Bill's 40 years in the field and then pulling this together, they're getting actually a whole big vision, what they are, and how they might relate to a climate action plan. So that's the first thing. His committee is putting together a slideshow, which he wants to bring to the Portsmouth Climate Solutions as a preview, and he wants to bring it here to the committee next time and have each of the 6 members have maybe a few minutes, so it might be a 20-minute agenda, to actually show the slideshow and what they're going to recommend, and then it might go to the city council from there. Is that the way you understand it, Peter, or did you have some different?
No, I think there was, 6 areas that they were focusing on
Yeah.
or about that? Yeah.
Really terrific areas.
Yep.
And he has the best, and so I think will be very informative. So that will be for next week, and I unfortunately will not be here. And I do need to say, somebody asked me 2 months ago, are you free on November 17th? Well, I said, well, it's not the 4th Thursday of the month, so sure, I'm free. And so I've committed to do a presentation for the Rhode Island Foreign Policy Committee on the actual project that we had here, which is a drawdown solutions, which we presented in Israel, and now we want to see if it might go as a more national model. So people are going to be invited to that. There might be tapes on it. So in a way, it's continuing the work that we're doing here, and that will be, if anybody knows, anybody wants to see that, it's going to be open to the public, free to come online. It will be a thing. And so the transportation, I think, was there anything else we need to say?
I just wanted
On that,
to-
I don't think so on that.
Yeah, I think.
I wanted to bring up one thing, if this is a
Sure,
good
and
time.
then I did have one more thing.
Oh,
after
okay.
that, Jemima, but go ahead.
John sent us an email earlier this afternoon about the greenhouse gas subcommittee reaching a milestone with the Phase 1 emissions. So I just wanted to call that out to the group, what great work this subcommittee's doing, and thank you, John.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
And if
We
you
have
saw
to
the
give Kate
spreadsheets.
home at a big, Kate, thank you. That's normally where she sits.
Kate's on her way to Spain.
So I actually have two things. The first one is a question. John, are you officially on the committee now?
Not yet, no.
When John, okay, I want to make sure we give you an official welcome when you get here, so.
I missed the window for
he's
this
got a-
city
For
council.
this, okay, but John has applied, and when he comes,
Oh,
maybe
put it in.
next.
I will need city councilors to vote in my favor.
And then the last piece I wanted to put out is more of a piece in process, and it's a synergistic piece. It's kind of connecting the climate action plan, community engagement, and the Portsmouth Climate Solutions committees, one of which is transportation. There's another one on waste. There's another one on, we have Planet
Green
for the
Building.
Planet,
Planted for the
waste and transport. So we have to, and as I'm talking to Bill and as we were talking about climate action plans, there's all these subcommittees that were going to be in the plan. Probably there'll be one on transportation. There'll probably be one on built environment, whatever they break down. We were thinking that there might be a structure that would be rotating kind of every year. And say during the first one, Bill was going to say maybe model, if we could get this going. Transportation would be the theme of that month. And then we could use the library, we could use the newsletter, we could use that committee and all that energy and expertise in that committee to engage the public in all the things they could do around transportation. And they would put a format up about how the different venues, and so once they developed it, they could turn that format over to the waste, and then they would have it for a month. And they could do all that, and all this would be in support of actually getting actions done for the Climate Action Plan. So that's kind of a big picture. It's aspirational, but we got such knowledgeable people in place to start to do these things. And I see that it's almost this unique time when you said the kingpin, we have an environment now that is ready and needing to act, and it's so encouraging to see the talent and the energy putting in. So that's about what I have to say.
All right, any other business for tonight? We might end a little bit early.
I hope.
Not if you have anything to say about it. Okay.
I have a question.
On you, Herb.
So we are a blue ribbon committee. So there are blue ribbon committees in the city, if I look on the site, and there are committees,
Standing committees.
send committees. What is the difference? And then I think that the mayor joined one of these meetings and said, we should make this a full standing committee.
Yeah, I can
Councilor Denton.
You talked
all
about
right.
it.
So, when it comes to the different types of committees, the committees which are standing committees, they'll be here regardless of who's on the council and who the mayor is, because it's by ordinance. So there's an ordinance that says, hey, the planning board will consist of X number of people, however many years each term is, and they rotate. And some of those are even by statute, like the land use boards. While a blue ribbon committee, it's at the whim of the mayor. So most mayors have always reappointed already existing blue ribbon committees, and they, within their right as mayor, could create other blue ribbon committees. And you are correct, at the first meeting, it was either the first or second meeting of this year, I invited the mayor to join, and he did say that was consideration, making this a permanent standing committee. There are definite pluses and minuses to that, and that's been an ongoing conversation since I first joined in 2013 or so. And I'll turn it over to Kate to speak to that.
One of my other committees, the governance committee, which I chair, has been working on committees, looking at committees, and looking at committee structure. And we're just now at the stage where we're deciding, what blue ribbon committees, like we hadn't been in blue ribbon committees. We've been working on ordinances and what's established by ordinance, and those appointment schedules and how all of that works. And we're just now kind of getting to that stage where we're going to talk about blue ribbon committees. This is a unique blue ribbon committee in the city. This is the only blue ribbon committee, from what I can tell, where people don't get reappointed yearly, they just get appointed. It's a very interesting blue ribbon committee.
Depending on how the next.
It's a very different structure. It's a lot more fluid than other committees. And usually the mayor decides each year whether or not a committee, well, usually in a term, whether or not a committee is going to be standing, continuing work. In this case, this committee's been around for a long time. So we have a few blue ribbon committees that have been around for a very long time, and I think that's the next governance discussion. And when that happens, we will invite in probably Bert here and Peter to talk about sustainability and any recommendations that you would have. Like, should we shift it? Should we not shift it? And we'll talk about the pros and cons of that. But this is, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at committee structure. And I would say, this will likely, no matter what, after there's a cap, become a standing committee at some point, just because of the nature of the work. We will probably need a standing committee to manage that, is what I would think, if it's not, if that consideration isn't already happening, so.
With the implementation of the cap,
Yeah.
kind of helps to drive that for this to become a standing committee. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
That's likely.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, Steve?
Speaking of committees, subcommittees and sub-subcommittees, knowing that the RFP is out there for the cap and we want to make that sort of progress as quickly and efficiently as possible, was just wondering, we did have that sort of subcommittee to put the RFP together. Do you think it would be wise to either get that committee back active as a sort of an advisory committee when we have a contractor or consultant come in and they're starting to put the climate action plan together and they need feedback from us, from the city side? Is it worth, we had, I don't know if the same structure, the same people would be interested. I know I would be interested in it, but I just was thinking, would that be a wise thing to just have ready?
Yeah, I think I think whether that happens, that's probably a good idea, but I imagine they'll be coming to the Sustainability Committee and asking for, support and assistance and feedback and that kind of thing. So whether it's a committee or whether it's the whole committee or committee of the whole, however you want to look at it. And I imagine there'll be opportunities to come to the meeting itself, but a subcommittee would give them opportunities to meet with people outside of the committee structure timeframe.
Right, exactly.
So,
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, we can certainly talk about that, but I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
Could you give us a brief update on where we're at in terms of if anybody has applied or what?
All I can say
Second
is
round.
we got a lot of questions. I think
That's
we
good.
put out 23 responses to questions on the website.
Wow.
Last time there was none. And then I think I can say, I'm going to say that we did, there's one company has applied. I don't think I can say who.
And there's been
So at least we're not skunked yet, so.
like a lot more interest on the forums and that we
For the
posted
UC,
on.
yeah.
That I've.
There was a lot of interest, there was a lot of people asking questions of the purchasing person, and so
That's a
we
good
answered
sign.
those. and-
What did we change?
The due date.
I think the big things were the August timeframe. We had a shorter turnaround time. For some reason, the timing of, I think, ARPA and other federal money was bad because they were working on other projects and couldn't fit it in. So all those things came together So hopefully this isn't the same case, and we
That's
have a
epic,
good,
though.
a good
Okay.
run.
I met a service provider at LES last week, and he said he has it and has been working it and is planning on responding to it.
Awesome.
I said, that's great.
Awesome.
Why now, and why not before? He said, summer is a terrible time for stuff like this.
Yeah,
So,
well, we learned.
I was glad
we
to
learned.
hear that it was that and not,
We added a
something
little bit of
else.
flexibility in there. We added a little bit of flexibility on the contract amount, because as you know, it's not hidden, but the council budgeted 100,000. We said 80,000 because we wanted to finish it and then hit the ground running with a project ideally, but we, knowing that that might have been the reason a lot of people said, we said the price is somewhat negotiable, and the time frame is somewhat negotiable. We added a little bit of wiggle language in there. We didn't change a lot, really. That was the biggest things we changed, so. And the other thing is this isn't really on the cap, but on the city side of the greenhouse gas emissions update as well, is we've sent out a survey to the employee commute to figure out the usage of employees. So we're pretty far along, I think, on the,
Yeah, we're getting there.
on the city government side. There's still a whole community side, which is a much bigger task.
We're
but
still gonna be the
we're
model,
We're gonna
right?
get there.
We will be
UNH
using
is
that.
very excited. We're using their tool. I talked to Jen Andrews, and they're really happy about it. And I think we're one of the few municipalities that are going this way, but the program is working.
Laura Lee, if I could jump in real fast, before anyone asks John who that company is that's considering it, please do not, because we don't want to cause any
Yeah, yeah.
conflicts.
Thank you.
My answer would have been, I cannot respond.
Please stick with that.
On the grounds that it may blow things up.
I just would like to make it standard that we say next month's meeting is November 17th or whatever. At the end of the meeting, we don't get the minutes till close to the meeting, and I just like to make sure everybody has the date, so.
Good idea.
I'd like to make it part of the,
Yeah, so we should, before we, I always get in the close, who's doing the next meeting, and who's taking notes, and the date. So you put that in the notes.
I'm not taking notes.
I'm taking notes, I already have it, yep.
So
Okay.
do you know who's facilitating and taking notes
So-
next
You do?
meeting?
You are, right?
You're facilitating.
Facilitating, unless I'm on a work trip, which I'll keep everyone apprised of. And Herb is note taker.
And Herb, okay.
Welcome.
So you're aware that,
I got in the notes, and I'll send the notes out.
good, and that
Right.
Bill Lyons will probably be here with,
Yep.
they're actually going to, I think, come to the meeting, and they'll plan to be doing the slideshow.
On a technical note, is there enough time to do that slideshow and have a discussion about the draft on green building? Or are we trying to fit in a lot in?
Bill was saying it would take around 20 minutes, probably a half an hour, so I think it's doable.
Just want to check.
And our next meeting will be November 17th.
Because
So you got it.
Thanksgiving is the fourth Friday. We only have two Thursdays of the year that we don't meet on the fourth
and then in
Friday.
December, does anybody know?
December, we don't meet on, I think,
So it's a shared calendar, everyone should have.
And the December meeting will be December
22nd.
22nd, yeah.
22nd.
22nd,
Yes.
December.
Oh, wow. Shoot. Uh-oh.
The-
So we are meeting in December?
Yes.
Okay,
You'll probably be facilitating then.
okay.
It's an early Christmas present.
It might not be a well-attended, I'm just thinking so close to Christmas and people traveling, but
Yep.
go for it.
I think I have to miss December.
we have
You
done.
can watch the
we might talk
recording.
about, we have, usually when we were less formal, we did actually talk about what would be best. And so if we were talking about December, there isn't any reason, we're saying the 22nd, we could do it on the 16th, because there's 5 Thursdays. Would that be better for people? We can do it right here, we got everybody here. Would you rather do it on the 15th?
It's probably
Yes.
better to be not quite as close to Christmas.
Yes.
I would think
You know,
so.
I had it as the 15th. I don't know where I got
Yeah,
that.
that's, we usually, we have done it a week earlier. So can we officially make that the 15th
Look at the
of
city
December?
Can we put
Yeah.
that in
We
the
need a
notes?
motion?
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you, John.
Make a motion that we have the December meeting on
Alright.
December the 15th.
Is there a second?
A second.
Awesome. All those in favor?
Aye.
And we've even had some times where we've met before or after, so we can talk about how to make the most of it.
You can't make it.
tickets, yeah.
So November 17
We're
and
fast enough,
December
Peter.
15. All right, Bert, do you want
This is
to
my
close this
problem.
out? Start us off?
What are you taking away from tonight's meeting? Or any thoughts you have left on your mind? Whose birthday is this month?
Oh.
Are you right or left-handed?
I'm right-handed.
So you go first, and then we go around to the right.
Okay.
Wait. What are you taking away from this meeting?
That this committee is, I think, it sounds like you're kind of like the center of everybody else, and you're grabbing things from everybody, and you're implementing things, and you're making change through collaboration.
Wow.
Love it.
That's what I'm
Bingo.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ms. Allen.
All right, so my takeaway is that I'm learning more and more about city government. You know, instead of us understanding nothing that gets discussed, I understand maybe half. So pretty good progression. But I'm taking away a lot of motivation. I feel like we're talking about some really cool projects, and I'm really excited to see what happens within the next year or so. So a lot of excitement.
I think I'm taking away what she just said. That's from someone who's never attended a meeting, and that's what she gathered from what we're doing. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm taking away.
I know I say this every meeting, but the difference between 3 years ago and today, where this committee is with all the subcommittees,
It's not, sorry.
is
The 19th.
phenomenal. And Beck said,
The
thank you
19th.
guys.
The 18th.
When I said that we're all talking about her, missing her.
Oh,
So,
love
Wait,
that.
I didn't hear the last part?
Rebecca, I texted her that
Yeah.
we were talking about her because we both committees mixed her, and she said, "Oh, thanks."
That's a Becca comment. I am taking away a lot, but there's some really interesting overlaps with themes that subcommittees here are talking about and that the subcommittees in the school board are talking about, and particularly that quintessential question on how do you educate your constituents on what you're trying to do. We're about to launch into a strategic plan, and we just asked the same question, because how do you get the response you want when no one truly understands what you're trying to do in the first place? And I think I haven't been in Portsmouth a long time, but I love that we always come back to that core goal of we have a responsibility to educate if we want to bring about change. So I will take that with me and continue to mirror it in the school board side of things.
It's a great connection. It's a fun group. I mean, I really like that we're getting things done. So I just wanted to say fun.
Connections, really. I was very interested in what Councilor Tabor brought to the party tonight about the Energy Committee, which I knew next to nothing about before tonight, so I'm interested in finding out more about that. And Councilor Cook, I'd love to catch up with you later about some practical learnings I've gotten from some of my contractors recently about what's involved in taking an older Portsmouth home off the grid and how the city of Portsmouth could be easier to work with. So I'm glad to know that I have someone I can talk to about it. I think you and Inspector Wolf and I might be able to have a good conversation about that.
My takeaway is progress. I think, the readouts to almost every item here, it was a healthy, readout, right? It wasn't like, how are we gonna do this, or what are we gonna do, right? Like, there's lots of stuff happening on many fronts, so very encouraging.
I'm really excited to have an inspector who cares about sustainability. That's a big thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, Josh kind of took the thing that I was going to say, because I was thinking back when I started coming to these meetings, not 3 years ago, it was, 2 years ago maybe, but the other thing I was thinking I was taking away is, I'm curious about the green building subcommittee and seeing where they're at. And as someone who spends a lot of time in a lot of different city buildings, I'm curious to see how I know how we can improve on a lot of these things. I'm curious to see how the city is going to accept these recommendations. Yeah.
We're making progress, and it's just so fantastic to say there's so many different initiatives that everyone here is involved with, and I just appreciate being part of it. And we're really, we really are making a difference. I know people have been talking about climate change and taking action for a long time, and we're doing it. We're doing it here in Portsmouth, which is great to be a part of. So thank you.
I'm just amazed every time I come to one of these meetings at the number of other committees every single person here serves on related to sustainability. It's astounding to me the amount of time all of you give, because it's not just this meeting, it's, this meeting and 5 others. And it's so hard to get volunteers engaged at that level. So, thank you all for doing so much work on the side.
Well, I'm really encouraged to hear all the work. I know that there's been a lot of work going on with the community outreach, and just hearing about it is really exciting. And it's really exciting to think about the Climate Action Plan starting with that sort of momentum already in the community. The hardest thing is really getting the community on board in a lot of these actions we're trying to get moving forward, and to know that you guys are making such progress is really encouraging. So that's my takeaway.
My takeaway is reflecting on what Kate was saying about how to look at the committees and how to structure it. And it's very heartwarming to hear what Michelle said when she went out. That doesn't happen without a culture. And when Kate said that this committee has been going for a long time, and Josh can say this many years ago, and you can say you're just coming on the committee, and we have the high school having a representative who facilitated the meeting like a pro and stacked it up people and knows all the skills. We have a culture here, so I would be very interested, because it took years to build this culture. How do we perpetuate the culture? Because to me, that's the strongest leverage point we have for sustainability. That's what I'm taking away.
All right, I think we're all set then. I think we can adjourn the meeting. I don't know if we need a motion for that too.
I think
You can do it.
Really,
All right.
you could just.
Meeting's over, guys.